Hello and welcome back, and that is right, we talked about this subject before, but I'll be straight with you, me and Eddie haven't actually discussed this in person for quite a decent amount of time. We're going to talk about right here at the top end of 2024, if you're on the fence about buying a Synology or QNAP, which one should you buy? In this video, I'm going to defend QNAP. We flipped a coin prior to this video. Again, we like both of these brands, if we're honest with you, but for the sake of the discussion, that would have been a really dull video. So we flipped a coin. I got QNAP, you got Synology. And in this video, I am going to explain to you why you should go for a QNAP NAS as your next NAS. What are you going to be doing, Ed?
I'm going to convince that Synology is better.
Wow, that is some bold, cool speech there. But I think straight away, if we're going to go through this, we're going to go through this proper. We have to agree this is no holds barred. We can say whatever we want right now. We can be completely off the cuff. And right now, I'm going to say straight away, for all of my love that I've talked about with Synology NAS solutions in the last few years, I'll tell you right now, one of the reasons you might want to go for a QNAP is because this QNAP allows me to use brand drives like WD, drives up to 18, 22, maybe even 24 TB. I can use any SSDs I want to turn them into storage pools or use Qtier. Do you know this doesn't have weird compatibility issues? It doesn't stop me using third-party drives. It doesn't tell me to use Synology drives. It doesn't tell me that I can only use their drives for NVMe. It doesn't tell me I have to use their memory. It doesn't tell me that I have to use their 10 GBE upgrades.
Yeah, that might be the reason why it's always hanging and booting for forever.
You son of a...
Because that's true. If I would switch the power button, push the power button, I know that this is going to switch on in 30 seconds and it's going to be fully booted and ready to go.
2 minutes, okay.
Okay,
sure.
1 minute at the push. This one I never know. It's going to be 2, 3 or 5 minutes. It's always different. The same as shutting it down. It's going to take forever. This one is consistent. I know how it's going to work forever. Always stable, never lagging.
Stable? Carry on. No, you do you. Carry on.
Design as well is really nice. And upgrades are easier. They're making their own upgrade cards. They are innovative as well. And it just works. Come on.
This works. I'll be I mean, you know what? Cards on table. DSM is the smoother experience of the two. It's a more consistent, smoother experience. And I do find that the QNAP allows me to do absolutely loads. It will tell me, oh, you can do all of the stuff you want. It doesn't limit me in any way. And as I've mentioned in other videos before, sometimes that can be problematic, having a system that'll allow me to do anything. And all of a sudden it goes, Jesus Christ, I'm doing too much. And it can be problematic. And then it ends up hanging or feeling inconsistent there. So yeah, absolutely, I will give you that. But I will say straight away, one of the main reasons that you, Graham, and by the way, if someone was called Graham, I've just freaked him out. You, Graham, the reason you came to this video is because you were looking at the Synology, you heard great things about the stability and the smoothness of Synology, and then you looked at the hardware, and then you went, what? Exactly. Because the hardware on this side of the table, my friend, consistently is better. And anyone that's been, you know, an IT veteran, even old PC gamers, it comes down for them, what they want value for money for their hardware, and you cannot deny that the QNAP side of things gives you a better hardware. Whether it is you go for the baseline models, where the majority of QNAP NASs now arrive with 2.5G by default, or the fact that you've got things like at the other end, Thunderbolt NAS, you've got U.2 PCIe Gen 4 Flash NAS systems there. You have got systems that can take advantage of enhanced graphics card utilization. You have got systems here with combo cards. The hardware on this side of the table is better. I will give you that software is smooth and consistent like custard out of Waitrose, but this is better hardware. And if I know what I'm doing, I can get more out of this. I can squeeze more out of this.
Yeah, you need better hard drive to be able to actually run that QTS operating system. Because that's why you can see that actually there are some cheaper value series NASs from QNAP, they're just disappearing. They used to have them, A series, something like that, with Realtek CPUs, and they are gone. Because you can't even boot that QTS on that CPU. Whereas with J series on Synology, you can boot DSM 7.2 latest OS. No bloody problems on this weak hardware. So Synology software do not need that all nicey super powerful hardware, because you can work on even on a weaker metal. And that's the beauty of it. Yes, actually you are right. You got something that Synology do not have. There's loads of ransomware.
Okay.
So what's coming out this year?
Well,
You had Deadbolt, yeah. What was it? Snatch, Locker. What is 2024?
okay, so I'll grant you, when it comes to ransomware, QNAP arguably has been top of the pile. It's such a shame, and I don't know whether it's a company culture thing. I don't know if it's the way they prioritise hardware over software. But yeah, let's be realistic about this. In the last, I believe, 4.5, it might be 5 years now, there was QSnatch, there was QLocker, there was Deadbolt, and although other brands were affected by it, and I think there are users there in the comments that may be watching this going, you always talk about Deadbolt. You're right, I do mention it, but that's because I think the statute of limitations, they need to be held to account for as long as possible for that, for 5 to 7 years before we let it go. Because, you know, if I wanted to shoot back, I would highlight Synolocker. Synology was hit by a very virulent and, you know, quite heavy impacting malware. But that was in 2012 or 13. And since then, and we talked about it then, and we have highlighted it back then for a few years, but the fact still remains that because they kept their nose clean and clearly learnt from it, that's why we don't talk about Synolocker that much anymore. And unfortunately, because of the rapidity of those ransomware attacks, unfortunately, I have not much to argue with you on that one. I would argue perhaps they have introduced a bounty program. They have introduced a PSIRT response to their platform there. They have made changes to a lot of the defaults on their system for admin controls, the SSH controls. They have changed a lot of their structure. And bear in mind that a lot of users that were impacted by those vulnerabilities were impacted by those vulnerabilities, a lot of them because they did not update their software or they put their systems in unsafe manners, which now it would be harder to do on the QNAP platform because of those hard defaults. Also, Acer Store and TerraMaster were also hit by the same Deadbolt ransomware attack. So, although what you are right in what you're saying there, I think we have to at least acknowledge that QNAP have instituted changes there. But unfortunately, we're still in that period where they're going to be monitored. So unfortunately, I can't really argue with it. But I will say, with a QNAP, you can do things your own way. You can't tell me right now, when you're using a Synology, that you feel freedom with the way you are dealing with your data in the system. And I'm not suggesting as a high-end techie that you crack into SSH and get the thing to do what you want it to do, but little stuff. Really? Tell me right now, if you want to use your own directories in Synology Photos.
Well, not to that degree.
To that degree. Not making a photo app go to the directory I want it from. You're right. The man asks for too much.
Exactly, you're asking too much. But if you want
What?
to handle this, just use containers, Docker, so you can play
You're
with
right.
things.
Use a third-party app, not the thing that I've just overpaid for the software. And do you know what? I'll go one better for you. They came up with Hybrid Share, a fantastic service there that allows me to bolt on a cloud service, and with that cloud service, give it utilize all of these wonderful apps and services, but utilizing cloud storage that is cached locally on the system. That sounds great. I can only do it with Synology's cloud platform. This system has exactly the same thing in hybrid mount, but it allows me to use a whole myriad of third-party cloud platforms on that system. And again, I'm not going to talk about hard drive or SSD compatibility per se, but I am going to say that a lot of the features and services have a certain first-party priority to them, whereas this allows me to index the way I want it to index. I can run the system and third-party components the way I want it to run. It allows me a greater degree of freedom and control over my system and my data in a way that is far too rigid for those users if they went for a Synology NAS.
Okay, it's 3 letters. SHR. It's been more than a decade people been begging for SHR feature. Why QNAP do not offer this, TerraMaster is already doing OT right now, and QNAP still not. People at home, they want to mix and match their drives. They want to. And QNAP can't do it. Synology, yes, you're fine. New DSM doesn't allow you mixing anymore in a way of downgrading the size of the hard drives. Like, you could go from bigger to smaller. Now you need to go from smaller to bigger, and you can't mix SSDs and HDDs, but still, you can mix those drives going upwards.
I mean, I would say, yes, one, the idea of having mixed drives, particularly when you're expanding down the line, is very advantageous, and it is a feature that I really wish QNAP would get on board with, and for some reason they will not. But a couple of things. Number one, Synology only provide that feature up to the Plus series. None of their XS, SA or business level systems include SHR, because they state that the traditional RAID gives higher performance, which is what those business users require. So, and again, that was from their own quotation. We asked them about this in a Q&A in 2020. So they themselves volunteer that SHR is by no means perfect anyway, and they will not offer it in those higher intense business level sectors. Also, you mentioned yourself, you can't mix and match. You can't scale down in SHR, and you can't really utilize hard drives and SSDs. They've got Q-tier over here. Why haven't they got Q-tier? I can mix and match my hard drives and SSDs into single pools of those mixed storage mediums, which, although I would argue, isn't as overall useful as SHR, I still think Q-tier could really stand to get more credit than it deserves. And also, sorry, last thing, you're talking about mixing and matching drives. Modern Synologies, have you looked at the compatibility list recently for a lot of Synology NAS systems? There's about 10 Seagate drives on there. Sure, you can mix and match one of those 10 drives. Have fun!
You can mix and match Synology drives.
Exactly. So again, but do you know another thing you don't bring? You will talk about SHR. Or, we haven't even touched on the fact that Synology includes BTRFS, which is lovely, ButterFS, for those of you that are going to correct me. You've got, the integrity of the checksums happening there on the data passing through for file healing and self-healing inside, lower resource consumption during snapshots recreation, and shared folder duplication. But they don't have ZFS, and the ZFS file system available to a lot more QNAPs, and they're bringing down the level of hardware requirements for QUTS Hero, the ZFS version of Synology's platform, lower and lower, and you're getting ZFS, you're getting the benefits, inline data duplication, inline data compression, inline data compaction. You've taken advantage of improvements within the caching algorithm there, taken advantage of triple tier, parity redundancy. ZFS on the QNAP side of things is hugely appealing, and I would argue superior to that of ButterFS.
Yeah, it just costs, arm and a leg.
We're going to talk money, are we?
No, because this is where the game is changing. When you start talking ZFS, you need QTS Hero, you need really good hardware, because you can't run QTS Hero and ZFS on some value series QNAPs. You can't.
You're starting at about a grand.
Minimum a grand.
Yeah.
So I think I'm going to be okay with my SHR.
But when you think about it, SHR, once you get to any system that costs more than about £1,200 to £1,500, they no longer include SHR. It's almost weird that this lot give you ZFS after that spend, whereas these guys remove that nice feature at the other end there.
Yeah.
But the apps and services, when it comes to comparing QNAP and Synology's apps and services, I do think there's a lot of parity with regardless of which one of these two brands you're going to go for. You've got virtual machine apps, you've got backup apps, you've got Office applications there.
And don't forget Surveillance Station.
Yes.
There's nothing better out there. QNAP tried to replicate it.
Tried.
They failed a couple of times and they still didn't get it. But Synology, this artificial intelligence built in to this camera system, you get 2 licenses for free. Not selling it, but
yeah, I was going to say 2 licenses. You say, woo!
That's really cool. They come
2 licenses.
Everything is all included. It's not just that. You can also have Office and then chat and all these
the collaboration.
Also AI built into this as well, and not just that. They also they have API sort of as well, a way of connecting to Synology, so you can control and can feedback. You can push and receive things from your Synology and control it. So you can hook it with your smart home already. So that's you can create your own solution.
But a lot of those things are afforded to you on the QNAP side of things. I will agree they're not as user-friendly in some cases or as smooth. I mean, Surveillance Station versus QVR Pro, I've talked about it here on the channel before. You get 8 camera licenses with QVR Pro on the QNAP side of things, but QVR Pro is just not as evolved, or it's good, it's got AI related services there, and you can use third-party M2 NVMe upgrades or even USB AI upgrades, but I think it would be fair to say that in terms of surveillance, their platform is better. But I do think there are pros and cons to some of the apps and services on the Synology side of things. You have that collaboration suite. You've got the Synology Drive versus QNAP QSync. You've got Synology Office versus QNAP integrating Microsoft's Office applications and services natively to the system. Then you've got Synology Mail versus QNAP's Mail application, calendar applications, note station applications, multimedia applications between the two of them. So I think it would be disingenuous to say that Synology is the only one providing these apps, but I would at least concede that the Synology applications tend to be more consistent. They have a much more consistent design aesthetic all the way through them. Synology spends a great deal more time on the polishing of those applications. I think, unfortunately, there is a counter-argument. How many people buy a QNAP for the software is a matter for debate. I talked a lot about the hardware.
Yeah, exactly. Because when you buy QNAP for the software, you don't know after 1 year or 2 years, is that app still going to be available? Like surveillance and other. But some of the apps are renamed.
I think the core apps. I think the core apps.
So sometimes, especially with surveillance, people bought them licenses, surveillance licenses, and now I think it was Elite or something.
Oh, Elite does a subscription
and it's
model
like,
now.
okay, you bought these licenses, but we are having a new app now, so thank you very much. Those licenses with an exit. But anyway, you probably got some better hardware.
But when you talk about hardware, and again, that's always going to be QNAP's strength, the hardware. And sometimes, whether you see this as to their detriment or you see that to their benefit, I have never seen another brand in the whole sector of servers in the last 20 years throw as much stuff at the wall. And I know there's going to be people, yourself included, and myself sometimes, that say some of the stuff they roll out can feel a little bit half-baked, like they could stand to perhaps be a bit more consistent. But they released the M2 NVMe NAS book before anyone else released a dedicated M2 NVMe NAS. They were the first to roll out the combo card that we talked about earlier on, the M2 NVMe and 10GBE card. Unfortunately, it's a Gen 2 based card when it rolled out the gate, so it didn't have the lanes to play with. They rolled out the 3-bay NAS model. They released rack mounts that had 4 hard drive bays and 5 SSD bays. They rolled out the 9-bay that had 5 hard drives bays, 2 SATA hard drive bays, and 2 U.2 bays. Thunderbolt NAS, all of that hardware, they've thrown it all out there. Now, if you look at the last 12 months or so, they have lessened number of hardware releases. QNAP have definitely had a bit of a wake-up call about prioritising hardware over software. And if you look at their news pages and stuff, you see that in the last year, even a year and a half, they have released fewer bits of hardware than they ever have on previous years, and at the same time released even more software updates. There's a lot more version 2.0s and 3.0s of those softwares. They definitely are learning their lesson about the priorities and the attention to detail on their software. Are they where Synology are? I don't think they are in terms of software, but they're better than they've ever been up to this point.
Okay, I'll throw you a bone. What software on QNAP do you think they are excelling on?
All right. Do you know what? So, I've already said a few times in this video that Synology, in terms of software, is generally ahead on pretty much most things. But do you know where they're not ahead of QNAP? Virtual machines. I'll say right now, if you compare Synology's Virtual Machine Manager tool, that compared with QNAP's virtualization station and their Linux station application and their container station application and their hyper protector tool, rolling all of those in together, you have got a much better virtual machine management platform. Notwithstanding that for the novice user or the enthusiast, you have the means to go ahead and download and deploy multiple versions of Ubuntu, multiple versions of Microsoft Windows directly onto the NAS for immediate deployment. On top of that, you have got the Hyper Protector that allows you to integrate and back up Hyper-V, VMware and more. And then you've got the Container Manager there, which has always been ahead in terms of updates compared with that of Synology and others out there using their later versions. And as good as Synology's platform is, I will say that when it comes to virtual machines, although they've excelled a lot over the last few years, QNAP always held their ground significantly longer and better. There's still a few features missing. For example, the Synology platform, from what I understand, in some cases can actually mount the VM that it's having backed up, and I don't know if that's something you can do directly within the single ecosystem here on the QNAP. But with the exception of that, I think on the Synology side, virtual machine handling and the options and configuration open to you, and the fact that you can convert stuff within virtualization as well to supported virtual machine images, that's something QNAP excel on. And that goes all the way from a device like this, which is that about 5 to 550 nicker, all the way up to the thousands of quid. But for all of the positive attention to detail that we're going with Synology on the software side, and we are going to give them a kicking on hardware, we have to. But what for you is the standout software on Synology's platform?
It's definitely active backup for business. So those virtual machines you were just talking about, you can actually back them up using this software, and it's for free. If you buy their Plus Series NAS, it's included in the price. So not just that, you can do bare metal backup. There's no other brand out there that does bare metal backup.
Of the NAS backup, yeah.
There's third party like Acronis, but it's going to cost you a fortune to do that degree backups. And it's not just that, you can back up your offices, online suite like 360 or Google Office and not other PCs. And not just folder level backup, it's like system backup, true metal backup. It's like amazing software.
I intentionally didn't include BoxSafe on the QNAP. BoxSafe on the QNAP does exactly that. It allows you to back up your profile, if you will, of Office 365 and Google Workspace, but unfortunately it requires licenses, which is super annoying and something that on the QNAP side they really need to get out of the habit of doing there. Horrible cough I've got at the moment. But with your side, an active backup suite, you didn't even touch on Mac backups.
Exactly.
The equivalent of Apple Time Machine. It took them a billion years to integrate it, but at least they did, and I've got to give them credit for that.
Exactly, because there were, for years, people were waiting for Drive Up, which is simple Dropbox-like folder syncing app, and they couldn't release it on Mac environment. So what they did, they not just make that app, they actually made something like Time Machine Backup, which is this active backup suite where you can back up your Mac bare metal. It's amazing app.
But, I mean, I said we'd circle back round to it. You can't tell me there isn't times, whether it is that we're talking to people in the free advice section who will get in contact with a bit of a self-plug there, people in the free advice section that ask about very specific requirements, and you want to recommend a Synology to them, but then they'll immediately come back to you and say, that's not powerful enough for me, or that CPU isn't going to cut it. You know, there seems to be a lot of missing processors, and they're very much getting in bed with AMD. Can you tell me right now that you're not disappointed with Synology hardware from time to time?
In general, it's not that it's too weak. It's just missing things. Like regarding multimedia, that's the most popular issue. They want something what is bigger than a 4-bay that has transcoding chip built in, and Synology refused to make any NAS that is above 4 bays and will have ability to transcode those videos.
They've got that Intel Celeron that came out in, 1998?
Yeah, but it does the job. It does the job, but it's not the issue. The issue is like people want an 8-bay that does that. So people ending up buying two NASes, which is ridiculous. One like a 2-bay with this ridiculous CPU does the job, and an 8-bay next to it connects it together. It's stupid.
I think, and another thing, if we're going to talk about hardware, I think we have to at least mention it, because if we don't, someone in the comments will take us out with a shotgun. 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, 5 GBE, 10 GBE. Now, Synology are starting to engage more with greater than gigabit network connectivity. One of the things I waved at the camera angrily earlier on was that M2 NVMe upgrade over 10 GBE. This allows the 4-bay and the 5-bay that knock around for between $500 and $700 respectively to have 10 GBE, which is good. But everyone else, and I'm including DIY in this, is rocking out the gate with 2.5 GBE these days. They're rocking out the gate with 10 GBE these days. Synology persist with 1 gigabit Ethernet. And there is the counter argument. A lot of users are saying, well, my TV's 1 GBE, my switch is 1 GBE, my router's 1 GBE, I don't need it. Well, one, loads of ISP routers are rocking out the gate with 2.5 GBE these days because of greater than gigabit internet speeds. And on top of that, it costs the damn same at the point of manufacture. So it's almost insulting that it's arriving with 1 GBE.
I don't know. I've always been on the fence, like either you go 1 gigabit or you go 10 gigabit. I never liked something in between 2.5 or 5. So for that reason, you can just stick in your 10 gigabit card, and it's backwards compatible, so you can connect it to your 2.5 gigabit router if you want to.
Oh, absolutely, but now we're going down the road of an optional extra. Now, I think Synology have they've rejigged their profile, and I think in the next 18 months we're going to see a very different Synology brand in terms of hardware as they introduce the B Station and BSM, and the J series gets completely got rid of, and then you have the Value series, which will go into the Plus series. And we're starting to see some of the rack mount Plus series arrive with 10G. We've seen a couple of solutions from them now using that quad-core Ryzen, the V1580B. I'm available for parties at short notice, and that system arrives with a 10 gig Ethernet port by default. That is great. And if they go down that road where all Plus systems arrive with 10 GBE, or at the very least 2.5 GBE, then I'm chuffed to bits. But that's the very least I want when the rest of the network environment is starting to jump onto 2.5 GBE or jumping immediately towards 10 GBE. Throttling me at 1 GBE today might not be a problem, but this system's going to last 3, 5, 10 years. That's when it will become a problem, and locking me in is a real pain.
Yeah, I still stand. I want 10 gigabit. I don't want anything in between.
Ultimately, choosing between these two brands may still be a case of hardware versus software, but I do think the lines have blurred somewhat in the last 12 to 18 months. So, QNAP here are definitely starting to understand what they're getting wrong in terms of software and changing things. Maybe not quick enough for everyone, but there is definite signs there of a reprioritization towards the software, which I think is a good thing. When it comes to Synology, I would say Synology engaging more with 10 GBE is a good sign. I'm not sure how I feel about when they started reusing that J4125 CPU more and more, but I think if you are looking at a solution that is a consistent experience, is going to be a solution with a lot of hand-holding along the way, and you don't really want to push the system to its limits, would you agree Synology is a better choice overall?
It's always the better choice.
And if what would make you go for a QNAP in 2024?
QNAP.
Wowza!
Nothing. No, seriously, nothing.
I just think the hardware, I think there is utility out there for hardware for a lot of users. But maybe you disagree. Let us know in the comments what you think. Let us know. Again, as always, we will do another video on this or an article that will update with your comments next time. If you want to learn more or you're looking for some advice on your first network attack storage solution, head over to the free advice section on the right-hand side of every page at NAScompares. Alternatively, you can take advantage of the Discord, which should be linked below and on NAScompares, as well as the Ask.NAScompares forum as well. If you need expedited support, something a bit more urgent or a little bit more in-depth, you can take advantage of fast-track support over on NAScompares via the Ko-Fi or Patreon pages, as well as hiring me or Eddie via the Ko-Fi or Patreon using consultation options that are available to you there. Finally, there is a membership program that allows you to not only access these videos early, but also get exclusive content, access content polls, and take part in our monthly Zoom calls. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Cheers again for hopping on, Eddie, and we'll see you next time.